Hey, Margie here. Are you ready to learn how you can use your mind to help with self healing? Well, if so, you are in the right place because our special guest is Brandy Gillmore. And Brandy is a world renowned mind body healing expert and host of the award winning podcast, Heal Yourself, Change Your Life, where she takes live callers and helps them get radical healing results in just minutes using their own mind. Brandy's incredible discoveries for healing and life transformation began with her own devastating injury that left her in excruciating pain using a wheelchair, walker, and cane for over 6 years. After healing herself, Brandy has been able to help others get breakthrough results. Brandy has spoken on stages around the world, been featured in several documentaries, and has given a mind expanding TEDx talk. Brandy has a genuine heart and sincere desire to help create a healthier and happier world by helping everyone understand this incredible healing ability that lives within all of us. And in today's episode, Brandy tells us where we can start, how we can utilize the power of the mind to help ourselves heal. So, this episode's full of lots of great information. Stay tuned. Welcome, Brandy. I'm just so happy to have you on the podcast. I'm really excited about what you're bringing to the table and going to share with everybody today.
Likewise, you are just so wonderful, and I love that I'm here. I love what you do, and your bubbly happiness and your podcast is it's wonderful. So thank you for having me.
So I always like to start with the backstory because it's especially yours. Yours is just such an inspiring story and how you got to what you do today. But why don't you share? Because I'm such a big believer. There have been so many times where people have said, there's nothing you can do. And I've always said you dig deep and you keep going. So I'd love you to share your story to everybody.
Absolutely. I got to be honest. What I do now literally is the last thing that I ever thought that I would be doing. I used to do network engineering operations, was very much into traditional medicine, and then I was injured. I had an accident, and technically two accidents, a car accident and a fall. And I felt just wrong, just right, however you want to say it. But basically, I went from living a full life to being wheelchair, walker, cane overnight. On a good day, I could get around with a wheelchair or walker or cane. And on a bad day, I didn't make it out of bed. And that was my life. And basically, of course, I started going one doctor after another, just trying to get better. And I was on morphine every day, and I was getting nerve ablations, infusions, injections. And after a while, because I was I was a mess. I ended up with osteopenia. I just because due to not being weight bearing, even though I was young, and my whole life just fell apart. And basically, once doctors said that there's nothing that they could do for me, at first I was devastated. I just thought, there's no way. This was over 20 years ago now, and so that's where I was. And basically, I began looking outside of the box for answers, and I was shocked at what I began to find.
Wow. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you use the mind and what you did with the mind for healing. It's just incredible.
Absolutely. So at first, the idea of healing with the mind seemed kind of, to be honest, ridiculous to me. And I had been going to all of these top medical hospitals. And even one of the hospitals that I went to, there would be an entire team working with me, where a team of doctors would come in and try to figure out a solution, because I just was like, there's got to be something. There's got to be something. And then finally, there was this medical study and that came up, and they said I could be a part of it. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get my life back. And I literally remember counting down the days to this study, going, okay, only 19 more days, 18 more days. It was like a kid counting down for Christmas. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. And so the study comes, and they wheel me in my wheelchair into the hospital, and they get me all prepped for this procedure. And I'm laying there just thinking about all the things I'm going to do and the places I'm going to go and all these things. And the doctor comes in and says, you can't actually be a part of the study. We don't expect you to get better. And in that moment, I had like the biggest softball. I felt like I swallowed a softball. I couldn't breathe. It was just like all my everything that I wanted fell like it fell apart. And the nice thing is they did end up giving me the treatment anyway, just but not as a part of the study because they said I was going to ruin the results. Um, because they knew I wouldn't get better, and they were right. I didn't. But the next place I found myself was at home, laying in bed, and I didn't even want to open my eyes. I was like, "What's the point? Like, I can't live like this." And then I had this like thought or vision or thought or voice in my head that said, well, "Brandy, what about the placebo?" And I thought about it, and I thought, it's a known fact that that the placebo works. Our minds must have some type of magic ability to heal or do something with our bodies. That's been proven over and over and over. And then as I started looking at the mind, there were all of these things. Like another one that was just shocking was somebody who has multiple personality disorder, which is actually now called dissociative identity disorder, that in one personality, they can have asthma. And in another personality, no asthma, but they have headaches. And in another personality, no headaches, no asthma, but they have back pain. And in another personality, they're completely healthy. And I was like, wait a second here. This doesn't make sense. And, even things like amputees, over what is it, 80, 90% of amputees still experiencing physical pain. And I, at that time, I was a bit jaded and I was like, great. So I can amputate my body and there's still an 80, 90% chance that I would experience pain. And so, when you're on morphine and I didn't sleep. And so, uh, when you start looking at that, you go, well, obviously the answer's in the mind. And then another thing is I started looking at it and the body is constantly repairing and replacing cells, even the bones. Science estimates we have a new skeleton about every 10 to 12 years or so, depending upon the study. But the one thing everybody agrees on is that our bones are constantly remodeling, constantly repairing and replacing themselves. And I thought, wait a second here. If our body's constantly repairing and replacing cells, then how is it possible for somebody to have that old football injury from high school? And so all of that led me to looking at the mind.
Yeah, so what did you do? We have to know the rest of this. You're
And
leaving us in such
I can't
suspense.
tell you the rest. So what I began to do, because it all seemed, looking at the placebo, how does it work? All of these things. I said, after researching it and neuroscience and, honestly, I started meditating, doing all the things, meditating, binaural beats, phantom phase frequencies, sending light, visualization, all of these things for years, for like 6 years, and it didn't work. And I started going, wait a second, why is this not working? Everybody says, okay, gratitude and chanting and doing this stuff. And, this was, about 15 years ago, 18 years, somewhere in there. But I was doing all of the quote unquote things. And I mean, so much so I was like phantom phase frequency and theta state and 14 hours a day in theta state to heal. And then I started thinking about it and going, well, if theta state was all that healing, then wouldn't most people who are dying actually heal? Because, if you think about a lot of people who unfortunately when they're in theta state for a while, they're, kind of half asleep, half awake. And I started just really, really analyzing. And so as silly as it sounds, I broke it down and started looking at emotions. And I thought, okay, well, how do emotions affect the physical body? Well, if somebody's embarrassed, their face turns red. Even emojis know that. Okay, well, if somebody's got a panic attack, anxiety, the racing heart, shortness of breath. And then so I started looking at different emotions. Okay, well, yeah, kind of common sense. We know that. But then there was other emotions, like the widowhood effect, where a senior who loses a spouse can die, or broken heart syndrome. Somebody loses a person can die, or be extremely sick. Or I started looking at this and going, wait a second, stress can actually kill us. Stress, quote, negative emotions. And so I took it even further into understanding how to implement it and to create radical results. And so, in one sense, it's really easy because we can see that emotions affect the body. But then let's be honest, there are plenty of people who are stressed who aren't sick. And I can look at that objectively and see that too. And so it wasn't one sided in it. I was looking at both sides. And what I began to figure out is that it's like a specific combination of emotions that impacts us. So the easiest way to think about it is, and by the way, if you think about it, if somebody's got There's people with PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, who are not sick, but they're traumatized. And so the easiest way to think about it is if you have a certain recipe in the kitchen, you can make cake. If you have a different recipe, you can make uh, lasagna or spaghetti or whatever it is. And that's the way that I look at it in the mind, is that there are certain quote unquote recipes of emotional recipes and emotional ingredients. And when we change those and identify those, that's when we create radical results.
So with your story, then you worked on yourself. How long did that take till you started seeing improvements?
I know this is so opposite of what everybody like. So once I stopped meditating is when I started getting better. So I started doing it different. I started going towards happiness, positivity, but then also getting rid of the negative. And I would say that it was i- in truth, because I'm impeccable with my words. It's hard to tell when you don't care what day it is. And that's what it's like when you're injured and you don't know if you're going to get better or not. You don't pay attention and you don't sleep very well and you're in and out. I would say 5 months, 4 months, because I was still figuring it out. But it was fast once I figured it out, but, um, that's what took a little bit. And one of the things, all the time I know people many times feel that if they just meditate enough, they'll get there. But a lot of times we can look at things like Steve Jobs, where even, founder of Apple, he started meditating as a teenager. And even it didn't help him. It didn't keep him from getting sick. It didn't keep him from, unfortunately, dying. And so, and while that can be great, meditating, depending upon the type of meditation, creating a real change is key. And so that's what I did is I really identified what was going on in my subconscious mind and I radically changed it. And it changed everything. And so that's what I do today is I help people to identify what specific negative thing is going on in the subconscious mind and help them to change it and get radical results.
So you're helping them with their own self-healing, which is just so fabulous. And it's wonderful when you pay it forward when, and I just love that when there's a gift, when you've gone through such a struggle, but yet there's a gift at the end. And, now you're doing this wonderful thing and helping so many. So
Right.
why don't you give us a little bit about, how we can utilize, like, how do you even figure out what emotions may be holding you back or keeping you sick or not allowing your self-healing?
This is what I love about it is that it's different for every every ailment has a different emotional component. Meaning, if somebody's embarrassed, their face turns red. And even emojis know that. But anxiety attack is a different emotion. And sexual thought is a completely different emotion, but we can see that affects men and women differently, obviously. And so every emotion affects us differently. And so a lot of times, speaking of bones and working with people in the bones, a lot of times it has to do with either feeling really unsupported in life or feeling a lot of fear and not feeling like a person has a support or even having a lot of negative emotions towards people who have supported them. So maybe even somebody who has a lot of feelings of feeling unsupported by their parents or feeling a lot of upset towards parents. So a lot of times the bones has to do with the feeling of feeling supported in life or unsupported to move forward in life. And so it really depends on the person. But uh, so that's a lot of times. So a lot of times I have people that go through a video course and identify, but it's really about um, understanding, when you really connect with your body and you really think about what is your body trying to tell you, to me, that's the biggest thing. And this is why is that the way I see it is that whatever pain or ailment that we have, it's our body's way of giving us a gift, a message. And for example, I was working with a woman who had extreme self criticism and she had a lot of knee pain connected to that. And she was very, very stuck in life. Now, for her, when I help work with her and get her from a state of feeling self criticism and shifting that, it shifted her whole life. I mean, imagine somebody spending the next 50 years of their life feeling extremely criticized, or somebody feeling really good about themselves and feeling incredible and feeling that. and spending the next 50 years of their life feeling good about themselves and confident. It's life changing. And so the way I see it is that whatever our body's telling us, it's giving us a message to change. And so it's really about understanding the what message that the body's trying to give us.
I love that. And where do you think people get stuck though? So many times people just sort of freeze and they're stuck and they're totally unable to take any action. Like, why do you think that happens?
I would say a variety of different reasons. Fear can keep people stuck, definitely. I would say another thing is that a lot of times when people start to see these patterns, that they can get stuck in them. So one way to look at it is this: a lot of patterns will start in childhood, and as they start in childhood, they attract more of the same and attract more of the same and attract more of the same. Now, the great thing is of course, when we take this and we change it, we change our lives, we change what we're attracted. So that's great. And kind of a grounded example of that is, we've unfortunately heard, a woman who has an abusive father can leave him and find the abusive boyfriend, boss, spouse, et cetera, et cetera. And so that pattern continues. And I think that's one part that makes it hard to change is people get stuck in the pattern. And so they believe the pattern and they see the pattern and the consciousness is around the pattern. So somebody could feel like criticism is true, or they could, it's like when you're trying to run away from your legs, it's very hard to do. And so a lot of times people want to change a pattern and they do it by trying to run away from it without really understanding how to change it in the subconscious mind. And so like the woman with the abusive father, so to speak, that example, unfortunately, she attracts more and more of the same. And of course, consciously, she's saying, I just want a man who loves me and who's wonderful. And then keeps attracting the wrong person, or even starts to say, you know what, all men are abusive or all men are alcoholics. And so I would say that's another place that people get stuck is because it controls our perception and what we see. So it controls consciousness. Um, and I would say another place that I see people stuck all of the time is people will go to work on patterns and they do only go to their childhood and they are going towards working on childhood patterns over and over and over. And that to really make a change, you've got to work with the now and the future first. And I know that that's opposite from what most people do. But the way you want to think about it is this, is that, imagine if you take your current self who's wounded and you work with the young self who's got wounding. Now you have a wounded adult self working with a wounded child self. However, if you help to shift the current mindset of the current self and really lift current self and get happier current self and shift patterns in current self, then you work with childhood self. Now you have a healthier adult self working with the childhood self that creates exponential growth. And I would just say, all the time I see people who have been on the healing journey, working on healing themselves, and they're working on childhood patterns for 40, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And that's another place to get stuck. And so I would say those are a lot of the places that I see people get stuck.
So what would you tell everybody listening who's saying, "Oh gosh, I'd love to start some self-healing." And, what would you say to people? Like, where would you say you said the one thing where they can start just, like, looking at patterns, but, when you counsel people, how do you start with besides that?
I mean, one thing I would say is, I would say one thing is this, is, when I was injured, the idea of suddenly feeling happy and bringing happiness in sounds great. And I was doing the gratitude and doing the this and doing that. It wasn't helping. And so one thing that I did is what I call mind programming with music. And it's about taking a song that makes you feel really happy and listening to it and purposely feeling it as much as you can. So for example, one of the songs I listened to was Walking on Sunshine by Katrina and the Waves. And it's like this upbeat, happy, happy, happy song that you listen to it and it just feels really, really good. Now, of course, I was laying there on morphine in extreme pain and any movement hurt. So walking on sunshine and it's going to feel good is counterintuitive for where I was, but I was purposely bringing in the positive feelings on purpose. And, another one was "It's a Beautiful Day" by U2, and I
I
was like,
love that, yeah.
right?
I love both of those, quite honestly, yeah.
And then but that's what I was so I would bring it in as a beautiful day, don't let it slip away, when all I wanted to do was slip away. But I purposely added in happiness. And so that's starting there is what I'd recommend. Now, I know a lot of people say bring in gratitude, bring in gratitude. I'm not a big fan of bringing in gratitude as a first step, at all. And the reason why is this is because all the time I see people who have underlying patterns of guilt or feeling like they don't deserve great things in life or self punishment. And what happens is then they have this guilt or underlying punishment, and then they go, I'm so grateful for this. I'm so grateful for this. And they're actually triggering themselves or keeping themselves more stuck or attracting another health issue or this, that, the other, or another problem. And I see that so often. Uh, so I don't that's for that reason, I don't recommend starting with gratitude. Of course, gratitude's a great thing, obviously. But when you're injured and you have patterns going on and you have emotional wounding and whatnot, it could backfire. And I see that a lot also. And so
Yeah, I
so
love
that
the idea of magnifying the good. I mean, that's something I teach as well. And because what you focus on grows. So if you're sitting there listening to those great songs and focusing on positivity, that's just going to make a big difference. So, and it's funny because as a physical therapist, I mean, just all the time when people, the effect the mind has on the healing is just unbelievable. And just things that you would say are miraculous happened really on a regular basis. Is that what you're seeing with this work that you're doing?
absolutely. I see this is the thing is when you really create a radical change, I see radical results. And the great way to demonstrate that or to think about that is multiple personality disorder. You know, there's even a woman who has multiple personality disorder who's blind in some personalities, but not others. And it's amazing. And so, I mean, I have worked with like one woman I worked with had a tumor in her throat and it had been there for months. And finally, she'd done all the meditation, done all these things, done all the healthy foods, all this stuff. It wouldn't go away. She was scheduled for surgery, had a pre-op MRI. It was 5 millimeters. You could see it in her throat. Her and I worked the day before surgery, and it disappeared. And the ENT was like, "I have never seen anything like this in my 30 years of working." And I see that all the time. And even it's funny because I never, even after I got better, I didn't plan on being in this work. I thought I'm going to show my doctors what I did to get better. They're going to want to help everybody, and everybody can get better. That was delusional thinking at the time, but that was my way of thinking. I thought, oh my God, and this works. And oh my God, everybody's going to want to see it. And then what I realized is that a lot of people don't believe you can actually heal with the mind. It sounds impossible. And so, or people think, oh, it means it's all just in your head. But it doesn't mean that. The brain is a blueprint for the body. It doesn't mean it's in your head. And so what I started doing is actually what drove me is I thought after, I wanted to just share it with people. I thought, okay, people have to believe this works. So then that's when it drove me to start showing it under medical equipment. So that's what I started doing. I started finding, like, I started figuring out how to show it under medical equipment where I take people with chronic neck pain. It'd been there for years and show them how to shift their mind. And they would do, specifically bring in the positive and also identify the specific negative. That is key. And identifying the specific negative emotion and shift it. And you literally see on the scan where the scan would change red to green and their pain would go away. And so that's what drove me is for people to see that we can actually do this. Cause I mean, I would have been world's biggest skeptic.
Yeah, that's so,
So
so great. And it's funny, just from my background, I can totally relate to this because, I would see this really all the time that, that this component, that's why everything I do is mind, body, spirit, because you can't separate the body and the mind. You just
here,
can't. So like in this example that you're telling us with the neck pain and and then you told them to shift, like what did you tell them to do? Here they have this horrible negative thought. Like, can you just like go in a little more detail how you would walk them through shifting it?
absolutely. So I actually just finished a study recently also, but um, so what happens like when I do these under thermal medical equipment is if you're familiar with thermography, it's basically like if you imagine, if and by the way, for anybody who's not familiar with thermography, basically what it is it's a heat scan of the body. And, if you've ever had an injury where it's radiating heat, a sprain or something like that, that's what happens, but even at a greater degree in the body. And so what happens is, let's say somebody has neck pain and they go under the scan, you'll see like a big red area over their neck. Or if they have back pain, a big red area over their back. And then when I work with somebody, I will help them to shift into the positive, but I also address, so I make sure that they have a positive outlook on what it is that they're, it depends. I mean, some people, it might be um, feeling like, using the same example that I used previously, but feeling like all men are bad or wanting to resist men and feeling like men are abusive, resisting. So a lot of times it might be something like they're resisting uh, a, a person or a situation or even their husband or wife or whomever, but helping them to see that it's not serving them. So that's what I do is I will look at it and I'll say, okay, look, can you see how you've had this pattern uh, of feeling hurt towards relationships or towards your mom or towards your dad or towards blah, blah, blah. You see this pattern, let that go. Let's make a radical change. Like instead, start to expect something different, something new. So basically, that's what I'll do is I'll help them to create that radical shift so they're really feeling differently. And as they do, the pain shifts. And and so that's basically what I did after I got better. So I was like, let me just that's take people and show them how to release pain and under medical equipment so they can see it. And but that's what I'll do is identify the specific negative thing. Um, and the reason I say it depends on what they're resisting. I mean, one person that I worked with, even in this recent study, who by the way had just finished like a 10-day retreat on meditation, was still in pain at a level 6, neck pain. And this person had a huge resistance towards authority. So with this one, it was a resistance towards authority. And so I basically said, instead of resisting authority, what if you're your own authority? Like give up that resistance. Instead, you be the authority. So it really depends on, looking at what's going on, but shifting it not just in the conscious mind, but really shifting it at a deeper level in the subconscious mind.
And do
That's
you
key.
find people you have this gift of being able to help people figure it out. Can people figure this out on their own or it's a little difficult?
I mean, yeah, a few things. I mean, in all truth, I didn't have this gift to help people when I went through my injury. So can people do it? Absolutely. I mean, I did it. Did it take me a long time to figure it out? It did. So a lot of times a lot of times what'll happen, people will go through my video course. And in it is an entire database of, hey, this is what I normally find, and this is what I so that's I would say also, the more you um I mean, some things you may just intuitively know. Or another thing that you could do is you could ask your body. You could literally say, hey, shoulder pain, what is it that you're trying to tell me? Like, what do I need to know? So that's another thing. It could tell you, hey, and by the way, if your body's going to tell you the information, a lot of times it will use the same submodality that your mind uses. And so, for example, if you're somebody who's more kinesthetic or more visual or more auditory, if you're somebody who's more into sounds, auditory or visual or kinesthetic of feeling, you might have a lot of times the answer will come through that method. So if you say, you know, what is going on with my body? What is my body trying to tell me? Then it could give you information. And so maybe you get a vision. Maybe you have a specific feeling that comes up and you go, oh my God, this is it. So that's another way. And really looking at it, just being honest with yourself. Self honesty is really key. Self honesty and genuine change.
It's so often people are completely removed from their body. We're just so busy. I see this all the time. Just so busy and our head, we have so many thoughts and we're just going that we don't take the time to, and I love that, just to ask shoulder, hey. What message are you giving me? And you're gonna get so much important information. Wow. So I know you have a free
Real
gift that can get people. Yeah, I'm sorry.
before, just real quick, I always recommend that you make sure to go to the positive first, because if you go straight into the negative and you increase the negative, you could potentially increase the pain too. So just saying that as well. So positive, positive first also.
So
So
get that music on, think of something really fantastic that makes you happy and just really focus on it and let it grow, and then ask the shoulder, right? So tell
exactly.
us about the free gift because that can help people get started too.
Absolutely. So the free gift absolutely that can help you to create a shift. And the free gift is about understanding not health and also wealth as well. Because a lot of times when people are sick and injured, I know for me personally, then what happened on top of that is, I went from a network engineering income to no income, disability income. And then I became more stressed, and then you get more, and so it's really about, starting to lift yourself, starting to feel better, starting and also about, insights about shifting your mindset as far as wealth, as far as your health, all of that. So, it's a free video series to help you to implement it.
Oh, I love that. And then you have a couple other things. You have tell us about your podcast because I recently listened to an episode, and it was just brilliant how you worked with because I think people learn a lot when they see someone else going through it, and so share with people what you do on the podcast.
Absolutely. I mentioned that my goal was to show people, hey, we can really do this. And so on the podcast, that's what I do is I take live volunteers who are experiencing some type of problem, ailment, or pain, and I help them to shift it. And what's fun is somebody will start out with a level 7 of pain. And before you know it, they're like, oh my God, my pain is gone. And they did it. I always tell people, I'm not doing it. I coach you how to use your mind, but they're doing it. And so you see all kinds of things from pain to actually the woman with the tumor that I mentioned. She's on one of the podcasts and all kinds of things. It's incredible.
It really is. It's fun too because they all have some positive ending. And, sometimes it would never be what you thought. That's I've you know, in terms of, the issue, it would really surprise you when you first hear the person speaking, and then when you hear what the issue is, it's like, "Oh, wow, very interesting."
And then you would never think you would never. It's absolutely interesting. But that's what I love. They're all insightful and it helps
Y
create a
Yeah, no,
radical.
it's good, and I think people can learn from this by just listening, and I'll have the link to all of that in the show notes too, and just tell people also, though, you have also even a more of another a course as well.
Absolutely. So I do have a video course, and basically it takes you and walks you through step by step how to lift, how to reprogram your mind. A lot of times there's counterintuitive information in the subconscious mind, so it helps you to navigate that as well, and to really lift and transform yourself. And of course, there's the database in the middle of it. So as you're going through it, you need to look up elbow pain or knee pain or blah, 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 or whatever type of health issue. It gives you a couple paragraphs of information on what it is and what I found. So it's transformative.
Oh, and it's just so important because this piece, we can't minimize this piece of healing. It's very hard to heal without this piece and to really accelerate healing and look at your story. It's just really wonderful. And I'm just so glad that, you're sharing this with everybody because, look, we're here once and, in this earth, in this lifetime. And, so many people live what I call in black and white and when they could live in color. And, why not live your best life? And why not help heal yourself so you because it is possible. That's what's I think, that's to me the very exciting thing
Me
that
too.
yeah.
And I love what you said, where you just can't separate mind, body, soul from healing. And so true and so spot on. And what I also love is the message that the body is giving. Every ailment has a hidden message to it. And when you understand it, it becomes life changing. And yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's funny because I always tell people with the bones, when people get a diagnosis of osteoporosis and they are so freaked out and whatever, that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to sort of look at your life and see what areas maybe you aren't paying attention to. And, and then people look back down the road and it was a blessing in disguise. And I think, so often that happens.
Well said. Well, you're spot on. It's just, well said. It does. It's honestly the way that my injury changed my life, I would have never guessed. I'm a different person, and I've been healed now for almost, 13 years now, and, life-changing, and, in so many ways. I am not the same person, and, it's the last thing that I would have thought, especially having a physical injury. I wouldn't think my brain and my mind and changing my thinking could heal my physical body. I would have said impossible.
Yeah, and I just love how you pay it forward and now you're helping all these other people. So before we end, this has been so interesting. Is there any last minute things you want to share with everybody?
Um, just, 2 things. First and foremost, Margie, you're just so lovely. You're just
Oh,
lovely, wonderful. So just that, thank you for having me. And also, you know, uh, that we're more incredible than we realize, and truly so much more incredible than we realize. And I'm excited for this spiritual awakening or spiritful awakening. And, it's like, the awareness of what we're capable of is coming and people are waking up to it, and it's just fantastic. And so just believe in yourself and really, you'll be amazed. So that.
well, I love that. What a great way to start the year. Well, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. And I really look forward to staying in touch.
Likewise, likewise, you're beautiful. Thank you for having me.
Wow, I love talking to Brandy, and I hope you enjoyed the interview as well. And now have a better understanding of self healing and that what we're all capable of. I highly recommend doing the steps that Brandy talked about, as well as downloading her free gift to get you started, because who knows what's possible. All the links that Brandy talked about to her free gift, her podcast will be in the show notes. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.